Hey everyone, I'm Package Jones, and welcome to episode 42 of That Gives Me Anxiety. Just getting out of the shower after being outside, cutting the lawn, working like a dog. Which I don't really know where that saying came from, because my dog doesn't do shit. Working like a dog. Sleeps 19 hours a day. And the second I throw the ball when we're playing fetch and he's not, and he's over it, he's over it. I mean, that's it. Can't get him to do it. Pretty sure it's just something my dad used to say in like a full New York accent. Out here working like a dog. Just to get attention or to have whatever he's doing be appreciated. But it has to be done in a full New York accent. Dog. But yeah, I was mowing. Ah, man. Nothing like mowing for a bad back. And of course, on top of that, it sounds like an old man complaint, but it started to pour as I was doing it. Zero rain on the forecast. I'm out there working like a dog with my bad back and just getting drenched in rain. But I don't know. I still just like doing it. Taking care of my land. Well, everyone, I've got a great episode lined up. Today, our anxiety is caused by a fear of failure, which is a pretty daunting feeling that I'm sure everyone has experienced at one point or another. Tell me out, I have a good friend of mine who's a photographer and started his own business as a photographer, James P. Viola. And to help me out, I also have clinical hypnotherapist Silke Herwalk, all the way from Australia. But before we get to the discussion, just to remind you, if you're liking the show, please remember to rate and review it. You can also check the show out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. You know, on YouTube, I'm posting the videos, so you can check out my mint green V-neck. $12. I can't beat it. Tell you what doesn't give me anxiety. Bargain shopping. And if you're liking the show and you want to support it and support me, you can make a donation through the Buy Me a Coffee link, which is in the description wherever you're listening. So yeah, I think it's a good time to make our way to the interviews. Thank you to James, and thank you to Suki, and thank you to you for listening. Enjoy. Joining me now on the podcast, I have my good friend James P. Viola, who's a photographer and a good man. James, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I think usually I start with like talking about how I know the person that I'm interviewing. I feel like I first met you at a bat mitzvah, and you were like very into swing dancing at that point in your life in like eighth grade.
Yeah, it's funny. I forget what I was watching, but it came up like how that was a fad,
Yeah.
and I was just like, oh, that was definitely me.
Yeah.
It's funny to think about that.
It like had a blip of like, yeah, there were a lot of people into swing. I remember thinking, oh man, like people are really, I gotta like get good at this. Like,
Yeah, yeah. I forget what I was. Sorry, the cat's trying to do something. I forget what I was watching, but brought me back.
yeah. Well, we have today we're going to be discussing a fear of failure, which is I don't know. I want to say it's like surprising how many people. I guess it's all of us, right? We all deep down fear that like we're going to be found out to be a fraud or that we're going to mess something up. And so, yeah, I'm curious to get your initial thoughts on a fear of failure. Failure. Geez.
Yeah, I think. Well, I listened to the clips that we're going to listen to later,
Mm-hmm.
and one thing that stuck out to me was, aside from my own personal life, but like it's funny to think that we do fear failure so much, because that's also really how we grow and learn things. So it really, to a certain extent, behooves us to fail,
Mm-hmm.
to know where to go next and like what worked and what didn't work. For me personally, starting my own business in the past 2 years, certainly it, it can creep in, and it's definitely, it can be detrimental if you kind of live and come from a place of fear. It definitely can be detrimental, I think, to any goals that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when I did like a year and a half of freelancing, and I remember like the complex like emotion that you feel like the second I was untethered from full-time work to just being like, oh God, like now I have to spend time finding jobs, and there's the constant, like you're saying, like fear in the back of your head that everything's going to dry up and like I'm not good enough to do this by
Yeah.
myself and stuff like that. So for a little background, why don't you tell people about your photography business?
Yeah, sure. I started it a little bit over 2 years ago now, May of 2020. And before that, I had a long career in retail management, worked my way up to becoming a general manager on Fifth Avenue. Coming from a place of having 50, 60, 70 people report to you to working on for myself, it was definitely a big change, but I think it would definitely set me up for success. Like just having that experience, dealing with clients and building rapport and whatever that what like a lot of it translated over to my photography business, like photography aside, just the running business side of things too. So,
Mhm.
and then really the photography and building the business has been really mostly organic over the past 2 years, which is great. I look back and I have done very little in the way of outreach or advertising that was really by design to make sure that I wasn't sticking my neck out before
Mhm.
I had anything to show anybody.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of patience involved too, and trusting in yourself. And I think the biggest thing with running your own business, whatever it is, I think understanding that, yeah, like the product needs to be good, whether you're selling a cup of coffee or you're taking photos of somebody, the result needs to be there. But at the end of the day, I always look at it as I'm the asset, I'm the company. And trusting in that has helped me allay a lot of fears in the process. Just reminding myself, I am who I am, and that's the asset of the entire company. That it's the product exists and it's competitive and it's good and it's solid and reproducible and people can identify it and say that's what I
Mhm.
want and they can have it. Just like I think kind of bringing it back to really I am who I am and that's what's worth people's money.
That's incredibly
Yeah.
healthy outlook. I mean,
Yeah, it has I mean it was kind of a calculated like a calculated or educated, I'm not going to say guess, but like I always
trial and
try
error
to,
got you there.
yeah, but I always try to like keep a very objective and
Mm.
quantifiable assessment of things. And I think coming from a science background, like my degree, kind of gave me that like basis of like decision making. Like,
Mm.
so I look at myself and I say, all right, I was at Tommy Bahama for 4.5 years or so. And during that time, I was able to earn 3 or 4 promotions into the premier spot within the company.
Mhm.
So I look at that track record and I say, okay, so like that's what I was able to do when I put my time and energy into somebody else's company.
Mhm.
What can I do if I put my time and energy into my own company? So
That's
that's
amazing.
where
Yeah.
I come from with this.
Yeah. I mean, that's similar to what I'm trying to do with the podcast. Is like I've grown so many different social media accounts and companies,
Yeah,
and this isn't even intended to be my full-time job. It's just something I like doing, and sure, any money I make is kind of like I'll take it.
yeah,
But it is nice to apply the skills that you've learned elsewhere for yourself. Just it feels good, right? It feels different.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
What was it like having 50 to 70 people respond to you? I mean, I imagine in retail, it's many of those people are like kids, right? So it's like you're going to deal with a lot of headaches, I would assume.
Yeah, it was a big mix. I had people report to me that had families that this was their main source of income, full time. This was
Mhm.
their career. And I had people that were in college and wanted to work part time while they were in
Mhm.
school. So there was like a whole range of people that had a large range of taking things seriously or not taking things seriously. Obviously, different personalities as a diverse of staff as New York City can offer. So it honestly, I was never into, and I'm still not really into fashion. Like it's not a driver of
I'd
me
say you're a
being in
fashionable
retail.
guy.
it doesn't like really interest me. Like I like, you know, putting on like clothes and like feeling good, but like I don't keep up with trends. I don't like
That's kind of
I don't
surprising
go
to hear,
shopping.
actually. Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't ever really go shopping. It's more of like a utility type. Like I kind of
I
need
need
some like
clothes to wear.
I
Yeah.
need clothes and like I did some shopping like after the pandemic with kind of people going outside again. And I was like, okay, I need like some clothes that fit me now. Uh, um, so, but like what always drove me was the people. So that was always the most rewarding part of that career path was the people. So like having, yeah, it sounds like it could be a headache, but it's also really rewarding at the same time. It's like you're
Hmm.
hiring people, you're training people, developing people, you're promoting
Hmm.
people. So that was like what drove me in that role.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for the listeners, James alluded to it, but we have 3 clips featuring therapist Silke Herwalk all the way down from Australia. So I think now is a good time to go to the first clip. So let me get this straight. In today's day and age, you're supposed to be drinking a ton of water, doing yoga, making sure you and your whole family is happy, strike a good work-life balance, exercise, read books, watch movies, eat healthy meals, be a big part of your community, and get 8 hours of sleep. It's unrealistic. It's too much. Well, that's why there's Instacart to take a little bit off your plate, or help put a little bit on your plate. Ah, I'm so sorry. Using Instacart, you search for all your favorite foods and items that you need from the grocery store, fresh produce, all your favorites, everything you want, and they deliver it to you. They go to the store and do your shopping for you. Just remove it from your to-do list, just with a few clicks. And you'll have your items delivered to your door in as fast as an hour. It's pretty quick. And through the link in the episode description, they're offering free delivery on your first order over $35. But you got to make sure you click the link in the description. That tells Instacart that this show sent you and it helps support the show. And you can also take advantage of the free delivery. So yeah, be nice to yourself. Give Instacart a shot. Joining me now on That Gives Me Anxiety, I have Silke Herwalk, who is a therapist and also somewhat of a recurring guest, where Silke appeared on Death Space Filling the Void to talk about her work with people who are grieving. Silke, pleasure to talk to you again.
Yeah, so excited to be back. Thank you. I've been so looking forward to this. Thanks for having me again, Pat.
I'm such a thrill to have you. Yeah, the pleasure is all mine. We're going to be talking about a fear of failure today, but why don't we start by you introducing yourself to everybody?
Yeah, great. So my name is Silke Herwalk. I'm in Australia on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, and I have been helping people with anxiety and grief and trauma for, I think, over 12 years by now. I also am a master hypnotherapist and master practitioner of NLP, and also a supervisor for the Australian Hypnotherapist Association and the Society of Clinical Hypnotherapists as well. And yeah, I work with people from actually all over the world. So I do a lot of Zoom sessions. Currently, I've got a couple of people in the US, somebody in Sweden, somebody in the UK. So yeah, it really helps with working with all sorts of fears and anxieties.
That's really cool that you get to work with people from all over the world. Probably, I mean, is there something that's common among everybody? I'm sure, it's kind of, we're all human beings, but I'm wondering if there's something that's been interesting in terms of what the anxiety is like across the world.
Yeah, so absolutely, there are some very common patterns in it every single time. And that really is that in actual fact, we weren't actually born with a fear of failure. We just learned that at some stage. Because if we were born with an inherent fear of failure, we would have never learned to walk. But of course, the kid just kind of crawls around and eventually sees somebody else walking and goes, that seems like a better option. And then they start pulling themselves up on stuff. And it doesn't matter how many times that kid fails per day, how many times they fail at this goal of wanting to walk per hour or per minute, they just keep at it. They keep at it, they keep at it. And then they have a snooze because they're exhausted from getting up all the time. And then they go for it again. So in actual fact, we were all not born with this. This has all been learned. And I think that is always really important to understand, because once we get that there's something that we have learned, there are also other things that we have learned, but we don't do anymore, like skip and rope or doing the hula hoop or whatever. We've learned that at some stage, but you know what? We just don't do it anymore. Mm-hmm. And in my experience, people always say, I have anxiety, or I am just an anxious person. But I don't actually think that is entirely accurate, because anxiety is actually something that you do. Because even the most anxious person, if they were an anxious person, they would have to be doing anxiety 24/7, all the time. But of course, the moment where somebody tells them a stupid joke and they're laughing wholeheartedly, even if it's just for a second, but at that moment in time, they're not doing anxiety. At that moment in time, they're engaged in a different behavior, which is laughing. So in actual fact, anxiety is a response to certain triggers, and it is a behavior that is very much driven by subconscious processes in a desire to keep the person safe. So all anxieties and fears have been learned at some stage. And because the job of the unconscious is to keep the person safe. And the unconscious does it in the best way it has learned up until this moment in time how to do. So, and it always does that based on past experiences. So for example, when we got little Johnny playing in the sandpit, and then the playground bully comes along, nicks the shovel off little Johnny and whacks him over the head with it. Now, little Johnny wants to give this situation meaning. And of course, because the idea of the unconscious is, if I give this the right meaning, then I can prevent that from happening again in the future, and I will be safer. Now, of course, Johnny has got about 1,000,000 different ways on how he could interpret that. He could say, aha, it happened in the sandpit, so obviously playing in sandpits is inherently dangerous because that's where you get whacked over the head. Or he could say, aha, the kid who whacked me over the head was wearing a red t-shirt, so obviously people who wear red t-shirts are inherently dangerous, and I better be afraid of them from now on. Mm-hmm. Maybe for the first time, he became aware that he had sand between his toes when he got whacked over the head, and there just happened to be happening at the same time. So now he kind of goes, aha, sand between your toes is dangerous because that's when you get whacked over the head.
Oh my goodness. There's so many ways for it to go south.
It's so simple, right? So, yeah. And of course, then, I mean, yeah, there's lots of stuff that we can do as the grown-ups to kind of prevent those ideas from forming. But of course, it very much depends on that situation. Like, for example, when a kid is, let's say, at the beach and a dog comes running towards the kid, it might even be a happy dog, but they're usually kind of like at eye level with a toddler.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, if a horse came running full tilt at me, I would kind of be a little bit worried about that too.
Certainly. Yeah. They're big.
Yeah? So, and of course, at first, the kid might kind of go, whoa, that was not cool. And at first, then the unconscious kind of goes, okay, that situation was not cool. But it's probably safer if from now on, we're afraid of all dogs that kind of look like that one. So at first, they might just be afraid of, I don't know, black dogs with a short fur, because that was what happened.
Right.
And then kind of go, well, actually, they are black dogs with a long coat. Better be afraid of them too.
Sure, just to be
there
safe.
Are dogs that are black with like brown in it. Better be afraid of. Well, and then eventually it just kind of goes into, oh, better be afraid of all of that. Mm-hmm. And of course, that is very much the premise that we learn with regards to all anxieties and all fears. And the fear of failure really is no different. That also is a learned response. It's just learned, through doing something and then, for example, being told off for it. Schools have a lot to answer for.
Yeah, that's true for a lot of reasons and a lot of things. Yeah.
I really like talking to Silke. She's just so like animated and fun. But one thing that really jumped out at me from the first clip is it seems clear once you think about it, but the fact that we're not born with a fear of failure, like the example of babies trying to learn to walk, like they're not like, oh shit, I can't do it, right? They just keep trying until they figure it out. Yeah, it shifts how I look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we have so much ingrained in us from a young age,
Hmm.
whether it's like superficial things or things that really have affected us. And the fear of failure is definitely one of those
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
at one point gets ingrained in everybody, it seems.
Right. Yeah, especially since like the example she was using about the sandbox where something goes wrong for the little kid, and it's like that's unavoidable. Where you're going to have like
Yeah.
a negative experience, whether it's the sand pit as she refers to it as, or I don't know, someone laughs at you if you're doing something stupid as a kid, and then like your brain is just like, oh, I don't like this feeling. Like,
Yeah. I think so much of it comes from like the child like makes up its own reasoning
Mhm.
for why something is happening.
Oh yeah.
And when things are out of control, like if you're a child, you're not in control of, you can't really control much.
Hmm.
You can't really control too much when you eat. You can't control, you don't control anything because
Nothing.
you're a child. So like, but you try to figure out what you can control. So you kind of look inward to be like, what did I do
Mm.
to cause this?
Hmm.
What did, maybe I shouldn't have played with that kid in the sandbox, or maybe I should have come around the sandbox from another side. Like you just create a reason
Right.
within your head that is, it's fabricated, it's made out of thin air, and it's nothing, it's out of your
Hmm.
control because you are a child. And
Right.
then a lot of times it ends up in blame. You blame yourself for doing these things, or like, what
Hmm.
could I have done different to do not have this experience, or what have you. So I think
Yeah.
like the fear, and as well as like guilt and blame, when I was listening to this, seems like all of that type of emotion is like intertwined in a way.
Yeah.
Fear is like one aspect of this reality that children create for themselves.
Because our brains are trying to make sense of things that I would imagine at times, especially when you're talking about a kid, that there's nothing to make sense of. It just is because it's completely out of your control, and you're
Yeah,
giving too much weight to like your own actions.
yeah, because you're just a kid.
Yeah. Do you
Yeah,
see that at all? I mean, you're a father. How old is Luke at this point? It's like he's like
he's
a
gonna
year and
be
a half.
2 in October,
Oh my
so
gosh, yeah.
he's 22 months.
So do you see anything like that with him? And I mean, he's so young still.
He is, but like, yes, and it's like as a parent, you try to do whatever you can to not set him up for that. But at the end of
Mhm.
the day, like things just happen. So
Yeah.
like I laugh, but like he pooped in the tub like a few weeks ago,
Uh-huh.
and then like Jess was like, it's all right, and like it happens, whatever she was saying. And he was like so hard on himself that I can't I can't help
Oh,
like laugh at him. He's like, no, no, like he knew he did like a bad thing, and like he
yeah.
like felt, he like was so hard on himself. Like it was
Oh,
like it was kind of cute. And I was like, oh man, it's
yeah.
okay. But again,
Yeah.
it's not okay. Don't poop in the tub.
Don't do that, but also don't be right. There's some level
There's
of
a
like, don't beat
line.
yourself up and don't do that. Like
Yeah,
that you got to find. It's inevitable. Yeah,
yeah,
that something is gonna like trigger that. But
yeah.
that's why as an adult you start to learn about your psychology and stuff like that. Hopefully.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that's a good point. Is a lot of people do, and a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't really look into why they feel the way they feel, or
Hmm.
try to understand like where their feelings are coming from,
Oh yeah.
and it can be really difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like, growing up how we grew up in the same town, it was very, I don't know, like closed off. Like I feel like I didn't
Yeah.
consider mental health to be like a real thing until my 30s, for me at least.
No, and I don't think I don't think I considered it to be a real thing until I was probably like, yeah, like mid early mid-30s.
Like last week, yeah.
Yeah. I it's a real thing.
Yeah.
A real
It
thing.
definitely is a real, like, hot take here. Mental health
Yeah.
is a real thing here.
It's a real thing. I mean, we also come from a generation, or like, I guess I mean our parents' generation, that it was not a real thing to them.
Right.
And for a large portion of that generation, it still is not a real thing for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of feel like, I might be getting off topic here, but like I feel like for a lot of things, we're kind of like a transitional generation.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you've ever felt like that, but like I always just like kind of felt like that's the underlying current of like, we're this like transitional generation between people that lived in the 50s and the good old boys to like,
Yeah.
that doesn't really work anymore. And like,
Yeah,
we're moving
exactly.
forward now, but like we remember what it's like to like hear stories from our parents, like from that time,
Mm-hmm.
to have a phone that was plugged into the wall, to like,
Yeah.
and like
To have to call a house and talk to the parents, to like call your friends, like growing up, very different, right? Just like the technological differences, and like the Stone Age mindsets of our parents' generation. I mean, not specifically our parents, but their generation.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a good time to go to the second clip with Silke.
Fear of failure is such a grand topic, in that it could be you're afraid to try a new activity or try a new business venture. It's such a spectrum of how it could be affecting people. So when people come to you, how often is it on the bigger side versus the smaller side? Or I feel like based on what you just said, it just starts to seep into everything, that I can't juggle, so then I can't start this restaurant that I wanted to start, right? Like how does it normally present itself in people you work with?
So very often the person I will be working with, they might not actually even be aware of a fear of failure. They just kind of go, oh, I feel like I'm stuck with my business venture. I just can't seem to move forward with it. I've got these great ideas, but I just kind of, for 3 months now, I've been designing my logo on my business cards. Feel like doing something, but not actually doing anything.
Right. Check the box. I worked on it. Yeah.
Right. Kind of make me feel better, but I'm not actually getting anywhere. Or they might kind of come to me and say, oh, I just really can't cope when my boss criticizes my work. Mm-hmm. Or there's something where they kind of go, oh, when such and such happens, I just completely freak out and I kind of start shaking. Some people, they actually kind of go, okay, I think this is a fear of failure. Mm-hmm. But of course, also the fear of failure is quite a broad topic, because why are we actually afraid of failure? And then it kind of then we kind of start digging in a bit deeper. And it might be that the person is actually afraid of other people making fun of them. Or they might actually be afraid of losing a lot of money. Or they might be afraid of other people kind of saying, oh, I told you so, or whatever. So it often is actually more a perceived threat to the ego. It often also is driven by underlying beliefs about oneself. The belief of, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy of this, I'm not intelligent, smart, clever, whatever enough, fill in the blank, really. And all of that very much drive also that fear of failure. So it's important to kind of dig into what is actually underneath that as well.
Right. I mean, it's astonishing. The reason why I wanted to do this episode, or that the idea came from, I read a study that the number one fear based on Google searches in the United States, far and away, was fear of failure. Like, people were Googling, how do I fix my fear of failure? And so it I don't think the United States is any different than anywhere else in the world. So I imagine it's exists everywhere, right? But that's an astonishing amount of people.
It is.
That are afraid to mess up. Why do you think that is? Does it just go back to our childhood and a time that we messed up?
Yeah, it's
Oh,
it's all
wow.
learned, because as kids, we take everything personally.
Mhm.
Because the only reason why we believe in Santa Claus is because the grown-ups tell us.
Right.
And there is a huge reward for believing in Santa Claus. It's
Sure
called
is.
Christmas,
Yeah.
right? So, and then of course, and it is so easy. And even though it is so incredibly obvious, the
Mhm.
kids still believe in Santa Claus.
You kind of want
So
to, right? Yeah.
you kind of want to, because there's a
Yeah.
huge reward for believing in it.
Yeah.
And of course, then also all other beliefs are formed in the same way.
Mhm.
Because then to the child, the whole world evolves around the child. Because kids just don't get humor up until a certain age. They don't get humor, they don't get sarcasm, right? They just kind of take everything incredibly literally.
Yeah.
So then imagine, I don't know, a teacher or a neighbor or even their own parent kind of going, oh, really? You know, the kid is
Mhm.
trying to help or whatever. And they, of course, they don't do it perfectly. And then mum is at the end of her tether and just kind of goes, oh, you spilt the milk. Oh,
Right.
why did you do that? Man, you should have been more careful. Da, da, da. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, and then that is learned. So it's plus, of course, also our entire system is built in a way. I don't know how it is these days. I haven't attended school in a very, very long time. I hope things are changing. But back in my day, certainly, you were only got rewarded for doing the right thing. You got bad marks for failing, really. You
Yeah.
got good marks for doing well.
Mhm.
Nobody rewarded effort.
Mm.
Back in my day, I remember like clearly, I had some kids in my class. I'm sure today they would have been diagnosed with ADHD, and another kid who definitely would have been diagnosed with autism. But back in those days, that just didn't exist.
Right.
But he just was made to feel stupid and like a failure every single hour of the day at school.
Ugh,
So
awful.
it's just awful, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I remember in grade 1, I got a D for handwriting.
Mm.
Right, that has stayed with me for a very long time, and because of that, because I tried so hard, but I just had. I mean, you're like 5 or 6 years old. I just had like coordination problems with holding the pen and writing neatly.
Yeah.
Right. So it just kind of all looked a bit messy. But of course, what that led to was that very quickly I just gave up. I was like, what's the point?
Mm.
I can't please this teacher anyway. So what's the point? So I might as well have messy handwriting and like get bad marks for it, and so be it.
That's absolutely true. And that's exactly my story is too. I have poor motor functions. And so my handwriting was always terrible. And I would go to resource room, which is just like an extra time to like practice and stuff like that. And then it just became, why am I working at this? Why? Though I will say my 6th grade teacher found out that if I got full straight A's, my dad would allow me to have a TV in my room. And I had every other A except for that. And he did allow me, he gave me the A just for effort, which was really nice of him. And so maybe my learned response is that I'm just going to be able to skate through life.
Yes, exactly. That's great. It's great. And honestly, I don't actually think that we can avoid in, like, I always get these panic parents. They're just kind of going, oh my God, I'm going to mess my kids up. Da, da, da. If you don't mess your kids up, somebody else will. Don't worry about it. We all got to learn certain things, right? And I think the other thing that is really important with the fear of failure is that very often we attach our sense of self-worth and our identity to our successes.
Yeah.
And that is very thin ice to be on, right?
That's so true. It's like, look at how many trophies I have. Look at how many Instagram followers I have. It's just, life has become this collection of trophies and artifacts and stuff like that. Yeah. This is the job that I have. This is the house. Yeah. On and on and on. Right. My goodness.
Exactly. It just goes on and on and on. So people have kind of like, I always liken it to, there's the person and then they have like an achievement box. And in that achievement box might be, I don't know, having a book published, having that many Insta followers, winning the trophy, winning the championship, winning a gold medal at the Olympic Games, or having this house, driving this car, having the perfect family and 2.3 kids, earning that amount of money, da, da, da. So then they attach their sense of self-worth to how close they are to getting those things that are in this achievement box. And as long as they still feel like I can still get there, I'm not worthless yet, so I can keep going, right? So then they still have that sense of self-worth because they can still get there. But if something happens, I don't know, global financial crisis, COVID lockdowns, blah, 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 and that stuff just kind of all falls away, all of a sudden that person, due to no fault of themselves, can't get there anymore, but they feel completely worthless, useless, and all of that. And that is a really, really dangerous position to be in.
Oh yeah, I've definitely had, when I was freelancing, a job that was making up, let's say 60% of my income, moved the job out of the city I was in and leaving me with 30 to 40%. And I fell into a pit of depression. I mean, I've always tried to maintain like a distance between Pat and work. It is difficult at times, but I'm aware of that balance. But even then, I mean, that's just such a low, my goodness, just, it just hurts. There's so much pressure and bills start piling up and
and that's enough to deal with. If you don't have your sense of self-worth attached to it. But of course, we are all kind of like raised in that because of course, you know, at the athletics championships in school or whatever, at sports day, you've got to come first. Or at least you got to come above the first three or whatever, right?
Or you got to not be good and then you got to be funny or something, right?
Exactly.
you have to then make jokes about it.
That's right. And then people kind of also try to make it better for the kid by kind of going, oh, don't worry about it. You're not good at that, but you're good at this. So now my self-worth gets attached to having to be funny or whatever.
Right.
But if I'm just not having a funny day because life just happens, then my self-worth falls through the floor. But of course, then, and that is also where the fear of failure comes in, because a lot of people, they kind of think it's like, okay, I can still get there. So I don't want to jeopardize my sense of still being able to get to whatever I've put in my achievement box. But if I do the wrong move and then my achievement box slips away, then I feel worthless. So that's where the fear of failure kind of comes into that.
Oh my gosh. And it's when that's exactly that. Extremely accurate. My reaction of like disgust was like, when you're here, that's what we do every day, but when you hear it put like that, it's just like, well, why?
Exactly. Why? Right? Because usually, actually, when you think about it, this achievement box has you haven't actually made that yourself, the stuff that is in there. That has usually been given by the previous generation, hopes, dreams, desires of parents, and of course, pressures of society and stuff, expectations. So, and then we of course try to conform, because as children, we just kind of know that when we are in alignment with what society and parents expect, we have an easier ride. Things kind of get different if we try and get difficult when we go against the grain.
Very true.
So, but of course, then there's that thing with this, okay, people want to get closer to their achievement box. And then I think the realization that actually needs to happen is this. If your best friend had absolutely no money, would your best friend be worthless to you?
Not in the slightest. That's not, it's not what you wanted from them. Yeah.
Exactly. If your best friend was depressed and didn't have a job, would that friend then be worthless to you?
No, in fact, you'd feel for them. You'd
feel for them.
You'd empathize with them.
Yeah. And if your best friend's marriage went south or they were homeless, would they then be worthless to you?
No, I think the only time that they would be worthless is if like they were a murderer or sought to hurt other people. But if they just even if they committed I was going to say committed adultery, but this isn't a Bible chat, so I'll just say they slept outside of their marriage. I'm not Moses. I still, I people make mistakes, and I wouldn't stop being friends with them.
So how come those same rules don't apply to you?
I know, right? I mean,
right?
My reaction is because I've got to go with the herd, right? I've got to not disturb the herd.
Right. And I always find it so fascinating that we can be so forgiving and have so much empathy for other people, but on ourselves, we're just incredibly harsh.
Yeah.
And once we kind of realize that in actual fact, our friend's self-worth does not depend on their achievements.
Right.
Our friend's self-worth is just a given. They got worth. Yeah. So then, of course, once we can start applying that to ourselves and realize that in actual fact, we do have worth, and that we can still want all of those things. Yeah, of course, want business success, want but realize that your self-worth is not on the line, that your self-worth actually is a given. And then you can start to enjoy the journey a lot more. You can actually kind of go, okay, I want that goal and still be driven, but you actually then realize that you're not on the line personally. You want those things and it sets you free. I work so much with business people and with athletes. And when they come to me, they're usually burned out, exhausted, tired, hate that training, but they still have to do it because who am I going to be without that thing, without this success, without this achievement? And then once they understand that there is a different way of doing it, that their self-worth actually is a given, then they become free. And all of a sudden, through that, they start to also get rid of that fear of failure. Because then they go, yeah, of course, failing is normal. I failed a gazillion times as a kid when I was trying to learn to walk. It's normal. It's what we do. That old saying is like, what's an expert? Well, an expert is somebody who's made every single mistake that there is to make. That's how they became the expert.
Look who we got here. It's our friends at My Software Tutor. Can Excel be my friend? Many people have wondered this for years. The answer is yes, it can. Excel doesn't have to be like the friend that your mom makes you hang out with in elementary school. It's weird. It's always stuff with boogers. Right? What's wrong? What's up? Why is that kid always eating boogers? Their house always had the best snacks, too. And there he is. Boogers. Well, Excel doesn't have to be like that weird kid. Unless you were that weird kid. Were you? Be honest. You know. I'm not actually asking. I can't hear your response, but you know. And it's okay if you were. Just take it easy with the boogers. Just talking about boogers to our good ad read. Don't worry. They didn't write that part. That was an improvisation. My Software Tutor offers 3 levels of real-time Zoom-based courses with a live instructor. They deliver practical, functional business skills in a friendly and supportive environment. It can be daunting, right? You need that supporting environment to learn Excel. There's no stupid questions. It could be really difficult. And as we know, when we talk about it on this podcast all the time, it could be really daunting to learn something new and put yourself out there. So think of this as like a kindergarten for learning something new and helping your job prospects. Or be better at the job you already have. Get that raise, get that whatever, take pictures of it for Instagram. Yeah, that'll be cool. Keeping it as vague as possible so that you can input your own. Just making a mad lib of your own desires. These courses will increase your marketability, whether you're an employee, job seeker, consultant, or contractor. Register at mysoftwaretutor.com and use the promo code POD20 to save 20% off all registrations. Thank you so much to My Software Tutor. Yeah, guys, take advantage of that 20% off and confidently list Excel on your resume.
One of the things that she was talking about that I think in particular pertains to you owning a small business is that people that come to her with a fear of failure may feel like they're stuck on like menial tasks like a logo or
some other smaller tool or whatever it is, as opposed to like digging into the meatier things of like setting up an LLC or trying to get clients or whatever it is. So do you find yourself ever really getting stuck with like these big lofty things, or is that something that you have had an issue with in the past?
Yes and no. And I kind of take the approach of doing something every day to move the business forward. And I think that approach, and it kind of like, there's definitely a seasonality to what I do. And there's busy times and there's slow times, or there's busy weeks and slow weeks. And so sometimes there's weeks that will go by that like all I have time for is shooting and editing and delivering. And if I have downtime, that like all of my projects, my workflow is cleared out and I don't have a shoot that day or what have you, I try to shift gears to, okay, so what am I doing now to keep moving the business forward? Am I educating myself? Am I working on the website, SEO? Am I working on Instagram or whatever it may be? So I always try to do something. And I think that has helped me out. Even in like the very early throes of it, I just always tried to do a thing a day to make sure I was like maybe taking a Lightroom tutorial or a Photoshop tutorial or watching a couple of videos on YouTube, researching other photographers, anything like that like I can learn from and move forward. So I kind of feel like taking that approach, it's never really felt like, I've always felt like I'm kind of doing my best each day. You know what I mean? I never set a goal for myself to be like, okay, I want to shoot like this many days in the year or something like that. I always tried to do whatever I could each day to keep moving it forward.
Yeah.
So like, yes and no. And I think like some longer term things like can kind of get caught up there, or some things get deprioritized depending on what's going on. Like Instagram for me was like a boon. It was like not anything I was interested in. I don't really like, especially like nowadays, it's a really great way to have your business be found and connect with clients and keep in connection with clients and other vendors and what have you. But like, it's obviously very different than when we first started using it, which was like more like social and see what your friends are up to and whatever. So I think it's like, it's transformed so much that like, I personally don't have too much interest in it as a user, but I also see the value in it as well. So like,
yeah, it's the greatest discovery tool for business and for this podcast. But yeah, you're right. It's changed so much to like video and the reels and stuff. And so it's another aspect that you have to keep learning.
It's a lot of actual work and time consuming work to do it right. So like, I've actually made the choice over the past like month that I hired somebody to do this for me, and like I feel like feed them the content, and like I think it's much better than definitely much better than what I was doing. And I think it like helps to show people like, hey, like I'm open for business. You know, I think if you go to a restaurant that they haven't posted to their Instagram in like 2 months and you're like trying to figure out if it's good or not, you might be like, I don't know what's going on here, but like everything might be fine. They just like haven't posted it.
They don't get it. So that means there's roaches in the food, right? It's like...
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just, but again, that's like something that was not a priority for me for a while, but like eventually you kind of get to it and you like make a decision about it and like you try different things.
Yeah. And the boom and bust, I don't know if that's the right way to approach it, but the busy times and non-busy times allows you to look at the business from like 30,000 feet every once in a while, which is a nice break, right? Because otherwise, if you're just plugging away, you're just in it, and it's tough to see long-term goals like that. So that's great that you're able to do that.
Yeah.
So one of the other interesting things that Silke talked about is how a fear of failure is really like a threat to your ego. So it's like, we're going to mess things up, and then, you know, that's going to mean my self-worth takes a hit, which is, you know, for like an athlete that has a bad game or match or whatever, or someone who views themselves as a photographer, like finding a way to separate your work from who you are is I mean, it's certainly easier said than done. It's taken me a long time to like growing up, I viewed myself as like a hockey player or this or that, like, and just slowly over time, like began to separate Pat from the different things. And it's such a healthier experience once you are able to do that. But it's really hard, right? Like I remember that job I had with Buzz 60 where I was making all those clips, like I was really all about that job. And then when it became time for me to like move along, I went through another like, well, who am I kind of thing? Because I was just like, I liked the job. I was having fun with it. And it was fun, but it's like, that's not me, right? It's like, that's not my entire personality. But I'm wondering if you've experienced anything like that.
Yeah. And it's something that I've been working on quite recently, is trying to separate my adult self from my ego and try to, like, I've gotten to a point where I can identify like my ego's intent, but that's not necessarily aligned with what I actually want and need to do. And a lot of like the ego's intent is where like that's where all the fear and anxiety and all that really comes from. So something that like I heard you talk about with Silke, like people that use like affirmations, and like I don't, but like something I've been working on is just like the verbiage of like, you know, my ego, like saying, like not saying like I'm afraid that I won't be successful. I mean, obviously you just bought a house, I'm in the process of it. Like you can imagine like the magnitude of that purchase and decision, and like 1,000 things can run through your head. So like kind of saying, switching the verbiage from saying like I'm afraid about I won't be able to pay my mortgage, let's say.
Yeah.
Switching to say my ego is afraid that I will not be able to pay my mortgage, because your adult self's gonna figure it out.
Yeah.
You're gonna figure it out. Like, you know, Silke actually brought up like a financial example with like the guy that wanted the $20,000 loan, and like the brain concocts like this horror movie ahead of you, whereas like, and that's really all like fear originating from each other's ego. So using that verbiage kind of helps me stay a little bit more grounded and focused, and like understanding of, you know, where that fear or anxiety is coming from. And I think like something that for me, like I think going back to the conversation of like mental health as a whole, because mental health was not talked about, and I feel like if it was like Pilgrim State, you know, I don't know, like
right.
it
Like
was like
the
white
1% of
walls
cases
and,
that
like,
need,
like that's what we would picture in like the movies or whatever. So like understanding mental health a bit more has allowed me to like I over the years I became very, very good at like not feeling anything. Like I don't mean like not feeling happy or not feeling, but like I've always felt like I was like a rock. Like I wouldn't get super upset about something or super sad about something or super happy about something. Like I learned how to like really suppress my emotions to like be what I thought was like even keeled, and like whereas something I've been working on to like help, you know, learn about anxiety and whatever else is just allowing myself to feel, because it's a futile exercise.
Yeah.
You know, like we are human and we feel things. I'm not sure where I was going with that, but
No, but
I
if you
had a
don't
starting
feel
point.
your emotions, like they come out in another form, right? Whether it be like drinking too much, or like you snap at somebody that you didn't intend to, or, you know, on and on and on, right? So it's important
you project onto somebody else.
Exactly. Yeah.
Physical health or what, it could be anything.
Exactly. So it's, and the other anxiety that you were describing of like worrying about paying your mortgage, I mean, you could just create the scenario where you're constantly in fear, and so you don't advance. Like whereas you'd get a job at a restaurant, you'd get a job like whatever, you'd find some work to be able to pay for it. You know, that's why it's important to like make sure your mortgage payment is like in like a reasonable realm, you know, and think about these things. But you'd figure it out. You figure it out.
And like and I think what separating the ego from your higher self is like really useful. And so like once you separate it, then you can kind of clear that energy out, clear the fear out, and then you can use that energy to move the business forward. So you can pay for you know what I mean? Like, so it's a work in progress for sure.
Of course. But it's and it's tougher to try to move a business forward or just like achieve your best life, quote unquote, with the baggage of constantly being concerned that you're going to like mess things up. I mean, things are tough enough as it is to run businesses and even like exist in this world lately. So it's like, you might as well just put those bags on the ground kind of thing.
Yeah. You kind of need to, like I said, get that energy out, free it up, and then you've got the bandwidth to do what you have to.
Yeah. I always think about like CEOs and stuff who are like, I wear the same thing every day or something. Like we literally only have so much bandwidth in a given day.
Yeah.
And so like not stressing about things that are small allows you to free that bandwidth up to be more productive.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think it's a good time to go to the third and final clip with Silke, where she further talks about how to help yourself with fear of failure.
Cool.
Hey, do you wish you were a thoughtful card person but don't have the time or energy? Right? You want to be that person that has a hobby, full-time job, crushing it in the job, has kids, has a family, has a dog, whatever it is, and still, right, sends that message, sends a card, handwritten, something that makes you laugh and cry. How does that person do it? I don't know. But maybe it's cardist. Maybe he's born with it. Maybe it's cardist. The Cardist Studio is your personal assistant. That's how you get it done, right? Somebody helps you out with it. That's okay. The end result is still the end result. You're thinking, oh, should I send them a card? That's it. From there, you just jump onto thecardiststudio.com and tell them exactly what just popped in your head. Your thoughtfulness. The Cardist Studio will get your personalized message handwritten into the card and in the mail for you. You're busy. You're doing a lot of other things. You know, it's not like they're going to tell on you. And the person's going to be thrilled. I've gotten one of these and it filled my heart with joy. Even better, it's fast, it's custom, and it's a total life changer. Hey, you're a thoughtful card person now. Look at you. New achievement unlocked. Just go to thecardiststudio.com and you can even use the promo code AnxietyPod for 10% off all orders.
I've always done things outside of work. And so one of the reasons why I started these podcasts is because at times like, you know, work doesn't always go your way and there's just things you have to do. And this is like a spot to do the things I want to do and still have a creative outlook. I was debating as you were saying that, whether it was like a fear of failure turned outwards to be like, look, I can't do it. Right. Or just something that I enjoy creatively. And I think it is a mix of both
I think it's really important to have other things than just that one thing.
Yeah.
So, for example, when I've got an athlete and all they got is wanting to win the gold medal or wanting to win the trophy or whatever, it is dangerous because that really is that slippery slope. But when they've got other stuff in life, when they've got, I don't know, nephews, nieces, friends, they enjoy whatever, book club, climbing a mountain, whatever, who cares? Then then they also get that sense of confidence of achieving something from other areas in their lives.
That's true. Yeah. And then like if they have a stomach bug on the day of the big race, it's not like I'm completely worthless and undeserving of love, even though that's never the case, right? I'm curious how hypnotherapy makes its way into all of this. Is this something that you do with all your anxiety patients, or is it like a special instance where you will use that as a treatment?
Yeah, so my business is the Australian Hypnotherapy Centre, and I use always a combination of NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming, which is also a great way of working with unconscious processes. And hypnotherapy also is a great way of working with unconscious processes, because all of this stuff, as you just said, is the person is not necessarily consciously aware of it.
Yeah.
They just kind of get that feeling in the chest, and everything else is underneath that conscious awareness. It's actually stuff in the unconscious. So by asking the questions that I ask, we bring things out of unconscious awareness a little bit more into conscious awareness.
Mm.
And because all of those things, hypnotherapy is a wonderful tool. Both hypnotherapy and NLP are great tools of working with the unconscious processes. And because all of those things are actually a problem that exists at the level of the unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
So many people, they're going to go, yeah, I know what I should be doing. I know, I just need to get on with it, and I just need to do it. Like consciously, rationally, they know exactly what they need to do, but they still can't do it because their unconscious is trying to protect them really from something that the unconscious a long, long time ago has interpreted to be a threat to them.
Yeah.
And now the unconscious job is just to keep them safe. The unconscious job is just to keep you safe, to protect you. And the unconscious goes, no. This situation is very similar to that one way back when.
Yeah.
And no, we ain't doing that. No, I do everything to stop you from going there. So then that's where hypnotherapy comes in so useful, to help the unconscious reinterpret those events and kind of go, oh, actually, it wasn't inherently in the sandpit. It wasn't red people in red t-shirts. It was just that there was some kid who just didn't have manners.
Right. Yeah. I also love that when you're personifying the subconscious, like your full Australian accent comes out whenever you're talking as that. It's so funny. I do the same thing with the New York accent. Hey, come on, take it easy.
That's true, isn't it?
That's great. Well, geez, I had another question and then I started laughing about your Australian. No. That was very funny. A lot of times people feel stuck. I've remembered it when a task can feel daunting, right? This big, dark mass in front of them that they're nervous about taking on, right? Whether it's, and it's causing their fear of failure. How do you recommend people move forward? Is it finding ways to just like chip a little bit off of it, break a piece off of it, boom, and then move about it that way?
Yeah, so one way is definitely to break it down. So one way people can get stuck is because they just kind of want to get too much done too fast, too soon, instead of just kind of breaking it down into manageable steps. Or it could also be that when they have got this big, huge, dark mass in front of them, they actually don't see what's behind it. They actually don't see that there will be something that looks lighter and brighter and happier and shinier behind that thing. So then we and that's really by asking the questions that I ask first, we're actually making the thing behind that big dark thing that's right in front of me, we're making that one behind it a lot brighter and a lot more colorful and a lot bigger, so that the person kind of goes, oh yeah, here's that dark thing, but behind it there is that. Maybe it's actually worthwhile going there.
That's incredible. That's also an amazing reminder for me as my fiance Jamie and I are starting to plan our wedding, where this big mass of planning a wedding is to remember that there's this bright, shiny thing in the shape of a wedding at the end.
Exactly. Right?
Yeah.
And you probably got to create some kind of movie or image or something for yourself where you see Jamie and yourself having a great time with all your family and friends and and then you just kind of go, okay, that's what we want. That's
just
why we're doing
crawl to there. Well, Silke, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think you're very good at what you do, and you're very good at articulating how you approach things. And so it's always nice to have you on my podcast. I'm curious if there's anything you think I'm missing related to a fear of failure and what we can do for ourselves.
Great. So yeah, I think the important thing to remember is that it is a learned response. It's a learned response, and as such, you can unlearn it. The other thing is also to be aware, just kind of go, okay, good. So what am I actually afraid of here? Because it's usually not the failure in and of itself. It is more what my brain has decided it thinks about the consequence. of that failure. And because we have got amazingly creative minds, our minds tend to over exaggerate the consequences massively. Another thing to do would also be to go, okay, great. So let's assume this does go wrong. Then what? Then what's the next thing? Oh, and then quite often people kind of go, oh, actually, I am going to recover from that. Or we become aware of the ridiculousness of the brain. So I had a client recently I was working with online. He was doing the business, and he was just, his brain said, okay, so what if this went wrong, what would happen? He goes, oh, he wanted to get a loan for, I think, about something like $20,000 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said, okay, but if the business goes wrong, his brain was like, oh, then you can't repay the loan. And if you can't repay the loan, then you're going to lose the house. And then
Scary.
your family and everybody will be homeless. And I'm like, how much equity have you got in the house? And he goes, oh, we own the house. Is your house worth it more than $20,000? And he looks at me and goes, of course. I go, right? But his brain gave him pictures of him and his entire family being homeless and living in the streets.
Yeah.
So of course he wasn't going to move forward.
Right.
But once he kind of realized the ridiculousness of the movies that his brain was giving him, and that was in no way proportionate to what the risk actually was, he was like, oh, okay, yeah, all right, I think I could do that. So it is important to kind of get the brain to think about, okay, what's that? What's the next step? What's the next step? Mm-hmm. Always remind yourself that, yeah, fear of failure is, I'm yet to meet a human being who doesn't do fear of failure.
Yeah.
We all do it. We all do
Mm-hmm.
it. Some of us have just learned more tools how to manage it better.
Mm-hmm.
And
And some people just stuff it down and
Yes.
further than others,
which is scary too.
Yes.
And I think the other thing is always to remember your self-worth is a given. Your self-worth does not depend on the outcome of this thing.
I love that.
You got worth.
I don't think I would ever put a bumper sticker on my car, but your self-worth is a given would be a great candidate.
Yeah. I actually, for years, I had like a business card sized little thing in my wallet that said your self-worth is a given. So which decision would you actually like to make?
That's incredible. Yeah, it's such a great reminder. I mean, if people do affirmations or something like that, I mean, that's should be at the top of the list, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, how can people get a hold of you? Where can they find you on social media?
They can find a lot of information also on my website, which is australianhypnotherapycentre.com.au. .com.au. There I have got a lot of information where I write also about how unconscious processes work and about anxiety and how I work with hypnotherapy. And there also is a just short 10-minute recording, which is kind of like a short 10-minute little relaxation hypnosis recording that people can download.
Oh, nice.
And they get more information that way as well.
Incredible. And also people can go check out the episode that we did on Death Space, Filling the Void, to hear more about how you work with people who are grieving. And if they are grieving, that's a great way to work with you as well. A lot of information there. And you also provided a lot of tools for people that are in the episode download or description rather, so people can click it and find it there. So a lot of great ways to work with Silke.
Great. Thank you. Thanks so much, Pat. This was so fun.
I'm so glad you had fun. Yeah, thanks so much. And we'll stay in touch.
Great. Absolutely. We'll do.
This is kind of like what we were touching on before, but separating your ego from your work, it's important to have things outside of work, right? Like that's partially why I do this podcast. It gives me a creative outlet. Do you have anything that you're working on outside of your work? I mean, you're a dad, that's got to be helpful, like your relationship with your son and your wife. Yeah, tell me a little bit about how you try to have things outside of your business.
Yeah. Well, between work and being with Luke and buying a home and doing all of that like process, it takes up most of my time for sure. I do try to exercise like whenever I can. And I also try to like it's something, this is more so like when I have downtime that like, let's say I'm like not too busy. I'll try to like do something more creatively with photography, and like something that may not have like an immediate financial return, but like something that is either creative for the sake of being creative, or maybe it will one day. Maybe it's a print, or maybe it's what have you. Recently, I mean, I think it's also like the past couple years for Jess and I have been like relatively, challenging, as it has been for like a lot of people. So like we're also like in a physical circumstance where like we need to focus more so on like getting out of where we are, and being on our own. And so like a lot of what we've been doing over the past couple of years is like in response to like our situation. So I'm not saying that there's like not downtime and we don't like enjoy ourselves, but it's a lot of it's been like very focused. And I think like being in your own space being in my own space will allow a lot more of that, even though there'll be new and exciting challenges that like may take up time. But I think just being in your own spaces, like you are free to do what you want.
It's
you want to
calming.
make a gym in the garage, you want to do whatever you want. You one thing that I've like really tried to focus on is just understanding that like you are like the situation that I'm in situation is due to like every decision I've ever made in my life has led me to here. And I think like taking that full responsibility for your life around you is something I've really tried to understand and like take that responsibility. Whereas like, oh man, I got laid off because of the pandemic. I'm like, yeah, like that's what technically happened, but like just taking responsibility for that it maybe sounds daunting, but it's actually more freeing.
Okay.
Because it's like now it's up to you to make your life. Now it's up to you to like create your reality and the life that you want.
Yeah, because when I hear that, I'm like, oh man, like don't be so hard on yourself. Like there was a global pandemic. Like there's a lot of things going. I like the sound of the idea of, you made your decisions and here you are. Don't dwell on the past, right? The past is the past, but there's also acknowledging the environmental factors of just the external world and how quickly it was changing even without the pandemic, right? And certainly the pandemic itself. But if that's working for you, that's working for you, I just
and I think it's like, it sounds like I'm being hard on myself, but I think it's also allowing me to be really honest with myself. I think that's actually what the past 2 years has helped me do, is be really honest with myself.
That's a beautiful thing. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. And being honest with myself, I think is starting to translate to being honest with other people around me. Not that I went around like lying to people, but like, I think it's all natural for us to like put on different masks and like have our ego lead the way and like be who we think other people like want us to be, and like rather than just like being ourselves and that being enough. I think that like kind of starts with really being honest with yourself as to like who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the more interesting aspects of moving out of New York and moving to South Carolina has like been the same thing where, we moved during the pandemic, and I took it was like a separation of self. If I wasn't in New York, right, like New York felt like a part of my personality, but it's been a healthy removal of that, I think, for me, where I'm learning more about myself, learning about who I am and who I want to be. But yeah, very similar in that sense that it's like, where you are isn't you. It's like, there's so many things that we think of that make us up, but it's like not accurate.
Yeah. And I think it's like, it's such a interesting time to like exist within like our close group of friends,
Mhm.
because like we live in this time of like hyper communication,
Mhm.
but we also live in a time where like we don't really know the minutia of like what somebody, not even minutia, but like even macro issues that like somebody is going through. So like,
Mhm.
whereas like if you saw somebody even once a month and you sat down and you had a beer with them or whatever, you'd probably touch on this stuff. But like,
Mhm.
because you might not see anybody for like, gladly things are like changing now, of course, but like in the throes of it, like you wouldn't see anybody for a year or 2 years or what have
Yeah.
you. And so like you life still happened for everybody, but you were in touch, but you also weren't really, really in touch with like what that person was going through at the same time. So it was like kind of a bizarre
Like a
thing.
blip, like Thanos. Like you
It
didn't know
was
like the
it was like a
the
blip, but
nitty
like
gritty.
you also like heard from the people all the time too. So like
Yeah.
it's like it was a bizarre it was bizarre.
Yeah. Well, it's almost like you were hearing from their representative. Like I remember like on group text, I would just wanted something like happy and to joke around, right? Like
Yeah.
dealing with like whatever you're dealing with, which is fine. I mean, it's not like there's
Yeah.
anything wrong with it, but yeah, it is a weird scenario.
Well, that's actually the thing too, is like you saw people so few and far between that like
Mhm.
when you saw them, you weren't like talking about all the, you know, deep shitty stuff that may have been going on or like concerning things that may be going on. You just wanted to like have fun for like the night
So
or whatever. And
desperate
so
for
like
like a light moment. Yeah.
yeah. So like, it just like perpetuated again. Like
Yeah.
you would wonder like what's going on with this person and like that situation or what have you.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like always felt like it felt like a weird, I felt like a certain way within our group of friends, like, because I mean, thankfully, like nobody else lost their income like Jess and I did
Mhm.
during this time. So like I felt different around people. I felt like
Do you feel like people were
it's just,
treating you differently, or you were nervous that people were like looking at you kind of thing?
I think it was like more so self concocted, like
Hmm.
nervous. Like I don't think anybody treated me any different, but like I think I like just was like maybe, like fear of failure, like fear of like how are they going to look at me now, or like how.
Well, it's exactly like what Silke was saying in the third clip, where she was like, she posed the question to me, like, would you treat your friends differently if X happened? And
Yeah.
so it's like, no, of course not. And it's like, but I know exactly what you're saying, because I ran through that exercise with Silke, where it's just like we're tougher on ourselves, right? And we're worried
Yeah.
about, but really like your friends are your friends, and like no one, you're not looked at any differently. But yeah, I've certainly felt that at times, like you're just afraid to open up. It's tough.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think if you operate from this like ego standpoint, or like with a mask on, or however you want to say it, your own perception of like who you think people want you to be, if that's where you're always operating from, you're always trying to like fit some type of mold, and you're trying to like figure out what that mold is, and you're trying to like,
Mm-hmm.
and whereas if you're honest with yourself as like who you are, you just are. And
Right.
like, and that's like all, thankfully our friends, I think, ask of each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not too much, or not really any putting on airs. It's just like exist. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like whether or not they asked it of we asked that of anybody or not doesn't really matter. I think, let's say I was who I was and I was like, and you all hated me for it. Oh, at least I am who I am, like at the end of the day.
Yeah, if you're comfortable with that, yeah, you'd make new
Yeah.
friends as this like worst version of yourself.
That was like a bad analogy, but I think you got my point.
Yes, I did. I had to get the
Living
joke in
your,
there though.
yeah, living life as you are, not like who you think you should be.
Exactly. Yeah. Again, like been really helpful for my mental health to sort of like I don't know if we'll stay down here forever, but it was certainly a really nice, from like a growth perspective, to get outside of like a friend group in New York. And not that like there was like anything wrong. I just think that like it was a result of like the result of moving has created this opportunity to like get in touch with myself more in a good way.
Yeah. And I think for me too, the, pandemic and really like reinventing my career has allowed me to take a look like inward and
start having that conversation. Yeah, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I'm curious your thoughts on hypnotherapy, right? The way Silke talks about it. When you hear hypnotherapy, you start thinking of, or at least I start thinking of like, the watch and you're getting very sleepy, but it sounds like it's a very, very different thing. Like, I guess that makes sense. I watch too many cartoons, I guess. But I'm curious your thoughts.
I don't know enough about it. I obviously listened to what she had to say, but I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
I don't really, there's got to be something to it, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah, it seems like it's basically they like help you with like a breathing exercise. It's just more like a state of like complete calm that they say they can interact with the lower parts of your brain. Like the more like by lower, I mean like the older brain, right? Like the Stone Age brain that's in there.
Yeah. And that's what struck me so interesting about it. The like concept of it seemed like it made a lot of sense to like let that subconscious out and like kind of try to communicate with that lower self. And I guess try to fix those like really ingrained things that like have been with us for like, it's funny, like I'm trying to like think of something, but like there's definitely stuff that like I do or like still think about to this day because of like something happened like 30 years ago.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I like
still beat myself up for things I said or did. Yeah.
Yeah. Like you won't throw up if you go swimming like 5 minutes after you eat food. Stuff like that. That like,
yeah.
Who said that? Like,
yeah. Oh man. Well, this conversation has been awesome. I've really enjoyed opening up and talking about these things with you. I'm just wondering if there's anything else you'd like to add to the conversation, or if not, where can people find your photography business?
Yeah. To add to the conversation, I'm just going to reiterate that I think mental health is important and issues are real. I urge people to educate themselves on their own mental health and take steps to look inside and look at their own mental health and take it seriously as they do anything else. For me, for my photography business, you can check me out at James P. Viola on Instagram, and my website is jpvphotography.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks again.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Big takeaway from this episode is you learn this idea that you were going to fail and it's probably wrong. And also that if you're a parent, that it's pretty unavoidable for your kids to experience this. But I guess that's why it's important to introduce the idea of mental health and teach them to check in with themselves. And yeah, because you're going to fail and it's going to feel bad, but I guess trying to stop it and not let it grow is the main idea. Okay, before I get to the weird thing that gave me anxiety this week, I want to remind you of my other podcast called Death Space Filling the Void. Wherever you get your podcasts is where you can find it. If you're liking this show and you want to support it, or support me, and as I stumble through the read, you can make a donation through the Buy Me a Coffee link. It's in the description wherever you're listening. Then there's Instacart if you want home delivery of groceries. If you sign up through the link in the description, it tells Instacart that this show sent you. I really slowed it down and then I picked my nose, and I guess I'll just keep that in the video. I'm trash. It was probably more of a scratch if I'm being honest. Then there's My Software Tutor with the promo code POD20 if you want to dust up, if you want to brush up on Excel or learn something new. It's a good place to do that. And the Carta Studio has the promo code AnxietyPod for 10% off your orders. So, okay, the weird thing that is currently giving me anxiety before I started recording this, it's dark before 8 o'clock. Completely pitch black. 7:30, 7:45. It's like I can feel the seasonal depression just like sit out of the coffin, like sit up in its coffin like it's Dracula. It's the worst part of the winter. You know, I thought it was the cold, right? Going through New York winters, but the seasonal depression still found me here. It's just the lack of sunlight. I don't know, what do people do in you know, the extreme north and the extreme south of the planet? They have like 6 months of no sunlight. What do you do? They must never watch any new shows, right? They're just watching The Office and eating pizza, just like all happy comfort things, right? Wow, that's why I have Prozac. So yeah, just getting anxious that I'll be fighting seasonal depression shortly. All right. Well, thank you so much to James. Thank you so much to Silke. And thank you so much for listening. And as always, have a great week. And I'll talk to you on Thursday.